Maybe they'll mention us in there.
Never know.
So I'll have this. This is just for my professor, just so you guys know about my program.
No, I don't
Okay.
recommend.
Thank you. So I'll tell you what this is about first, so that you guys also have an idea, right? My background is in computer engineering, and I also have a business degree. And recently, I went through this program that I started about a month and a half ago, called the Founder Institute, that is based out of Founder Institute. Founder Institute. It's based out of Silicon Valley. They're very well known, and they just started here in Fort Lauderdale. I think in December, actually. So they're very recent here in Fort Lauderdale, but they've been around in Silicon Valley for a long time.
Oh, all right.
And so basically, they take anybody who is passionate about something, and they encourage you and help you and sort of guide you and teach you, and they introduce you to mentors, and they say, we'll help you evaluate your potential business to make sure that you're not wasting your time. Sometimes this is called like an accelerator program.
Sort of like short.
Yeah, it's like Shark Tank. Actually, it is very much like that, because
I love that show.
they do bring mentors in, and they evaluate our idea on a weekly basis. Actually.
That's cool.
Yeah, and some of these people are very highly, like recently we had the founder of Citrix. I don't know if you guys are familiar. Yeah, he was there. He was there actually last week.
I interviewed with him. He didn't hire me though.
I'm in the.
Had health problems.
That was his boss.
Step back.
I don't remember
There
the
you
gentleman's name,
That's right.
but yeah, he's looked like a very bright guy. I mean, he's already out of Citrix, right?
Bucci, there was one of them. I can't.
It wasn't him. It was
the other one.
It was the other one. Yeah.
Both of them were former IBMers, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Both of them. One of them worked on OS2 when I was there.
Yeah.
You don't even know what that is.
I know about OS2. I'm not that young.
I know.
I know about OS2.
I'm
Yes.
older than you, I think,
Yeah.
but I don't know what that
It
is.
was the
I worked
operating
on the lab.
system
Operating system.
from
okay.
IBM. Yeah.
I was in the lab and I also sold the product.
Wow. So you used to work for IBM back in the day here?
I
The
got 30
Boca plant over here?
30-year combat experience. My experience had started in the space program
Wow.
in Huntsville. And then after that, I went
In Huntsville, Alabama, I used to work for a company in Huntsville, Alabama, Adtran. Have you heard of Adtran? Adtran. Adtran. Yeah, they're actually one of the
or AT?
AD. Yeah, they're based out of Huntsville, Alabama.
Yeah.
I worked there for like 5
It's a
years.
beautiful city.
Beautiful, yeah.
I was there in the space program. After that, I went to the military side of IBM. Worked on some crazy stuff like space shuttle, weapon systems.
Wow.
Managed a weapon system at Dulles Airport, classified. I'll kill you if I tell you about it.
You'd have to shoot us all, right? If you don't.
No, it was Redfall. You remember seeing the movie Hunt for the Red October?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, great movie.
That weapon system was designed with the Navy, Johnsville Lab in Pennsylvania, and IBM to launch a helo from the deck of a frigate as a ship.
I know that. I do know. I know what a frigate is.
You know what
Not frigate, like frigate, but a frigate, a ship.
and it had the weapon system. The weapon system was to destroy Russian submarines. Well, anyway, the weapon system. If you remember the movie when they launched the helo,
Yeah.
they dropped the torpedo. All that helo, IBM was prime on the weapon system. The helo, as well as the data link back to the ship. The way that worked was really simple. I tell you this quickly. As the ship is going across, it's pulling a towed array. It has a sonobuoy type of thing in the back. It sends out signals in the water. It hits something like this, and it will come back and tell you whether it's metal or not. In other words, it picks up a bogey, as they call it.
Oh.
So it was determining the approximate distance where it is from the ship. Now, in the CIC, that's Combat Information Center, we had consoles there. The guy sitting at the console could read what it hit in terms of metal and so forth. The weapons officer on board the CIC would determine whether or not to launch or not. He would call the air officer and say, "You have authorized to launch." And he'd tell him what sector to go to. So he would launch a helicopter and he would fly a circle like that around the bogey, shooting sonobuoys into the water. As soon as they hit the water, they become activated because salt water is activated. And it send the signal into the water, hit the boat, go up to the on it went back to the helo. And the data link downloads back to the ship. They knew exactly where the submarine was.
That's something.
It sounds like Star Wars. It was.
Yeah.
Back then.
For
Back
back
then,
in that,
for
back in
back
the
in
day
the
then,
The
yeah.
thing was, then they, based upon the sounding it had, we could read, believe it or not, we could tell you what boat it was from the Russian fleet.
Wow.
That's how good the sonar
Wow.
was. And on top of that was, you say, okay, it's in such a, you're authorized to launch, or execute, they call it. You're authorized to execute. So they send a note, or send air officer would get the weapons to launch. He would turn around and launch the weapons officer in the back of the helo. He had a console, and he could launch the torpedo. If you remember in the movie, it launched. He hit the water and became active. He could actually drive the torpedo into the boat.
Wow.
In other words, you can throw this chaff in the water. You've seen that?
Yeah, yeah.
And get away? Well, you can't do it with this system.
Right. That's
You
to
actually drive
throw off the make it think that
the
you're over.
torpedo runs faster than the boat.
Mhm.
So it's execution.
Is that like heat seeking, or that's even more
Metal.
modified than that?
It's
It's
just
it's a weapon system.
Yeah.
not heat seeking.
very interesting. Thank you for
Wow.
today's history
Anyway.
lesson.
That was one of the weapon systems I made.
That's interesting.
Wow. Yeah, and
I'm
I
just an old fart, though. I've been.
No, you're not. You got a lot of experience behind you, a lot of years of knowledge and experience.
so
Anyway,
can
tell
I
me about what
can
you
I
do.
understand where you guys are board members from, or what communities each one of you?
Richard?
I'm the treasurer for Island Lakes, which is a sub-association of Loggers Run. We have 5 board members. 2 of us serve on the Loggers Run, the master board. I'm one of the 2 members of the Loggers Run board, which is where I run into Maria and Ron. And through Maria's request, that's why I'm kind of participating tonight. So I've got experience of working on Island Lakes. I've been board treasurer for about 5-6 years. I've served probably a couple of years on Loggers Run, and I'm also a property manager.
Okay, wonderful.
I didn't know that. Are you a CAM? You got a CAM
Yeah.
license? Yeah.
I'm also an appraiser.
My name is Ron Hart. I'm president of Wine Lakes Estates. I'm also president of Loggers Run. Wine Lakes Estates is a sub-association of the Master Association of Loggers Run. Been on the board for Wine Lakes Estates for about 10 years or more. Been on the board of Loggers Run for over 10 years myself. So I've served in capacity as vice president and also as president in both cases.
Maria?
Okay, I'm Maria Matthews. I'm on the Board of Governors. I'm not an officer, but I'm on the Board of Governors. And I'm on 2 committees for Loggers Run. I'm on the ACC committee, Architectural Control, and I'm also on a newly formed committee we're working on presently with Richard, the R&R, Rules and Regulations Committee. Been on the board for 2 years, and on ACC going on 6 years. And the Rules and Regs Committee, we've just started for about almost a year. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe Richard, if you can sit over there, what I'll
Sure.
do is I'll put
So
the
we'll have all
laptop over
3 of
here.
us
Yeah.
here?
So
Yeah.
you can. I'll just sit down on the floor here and show you the mock-up that I created. So basically, this came about because my father, being a structural engineer, does a lot of work with condos by the beach, doing repairs and improvements for condos.
I started in civil. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
you started in civil? Okay. So you know a little bit of how, my dad has been a civil, structural, or consulting engineer for forever, right? And he always told me that something like this would probably be helpful. So the idea is to help in the finding of the contractors and engineers for homeowners associations and condo board and condos, because perhaps they either want to have multiple bids or they're required to have multiple bids, and perhaps they don't necessarily know where to get or find the right resources. So that's the initial idea, and based on that, this is a mock-up. It's not the tool isn't functional yet, but this is kind of to demonstrate what it's supposed to be like. So when you go to the site, from the point of view of a either a board member or a property manager, for example, you would simply go and say to the tool that you want to solicit a bid. The tool will be pre-populated with a database, and actually the database is already built. I just kind of have to enhance it, but it's going to have engineers and contractors. So initially what you would do is you would put like your area code, for example. You would say the type of person that you're looking for. So this is just the first component of the tool, the search component of it, right? So in this case, the example is, let's say, just a general contractor. And after you do that, it will actually go to the database if the internet will cooperate. And it will be populated with contractors in the area already pre-populated. Now, some of these contractors may have already registered for the website. Some of them may not have, right? It'll show some relevant information. Like, for example, it cross-references with the Better Business Bureau and shows you the rating for them. Once they receive a quote, the tool will ask them for additional information so that the database will be more useful, right, as more people use it. But initially, you see a set of results here, presumably of contractors in your area. You click on Prepare a Request for Proposal. You'll be able to select, for example, yes, I want to send it to all of them, or I just want to send it to some of them. Right, you would give the estimated date to award the project. Now, this component of it is a template. So because we chose a structural engineer, now it gives you the option of the type of work that a structural engineer could do. Are you looking, do you need a structural engineer because you have column repair work, or you have beam damage, or structural balcony repairs? And this would be have obviously more choices in the future. The example that I have here is something like stucco repair, right? The stucco that goes on the surface of the concrete. So based on that, it will present a pre-designed template. As I go through and talk to experts in each field, in this case engineers, they will be able to tell me this is the sort of information that will be required in order to be able to obtain a bid and not just an estimate, something more accurate. So in this case, because this is for a condo, the number of stories that the condo has, the total number of condo units, whatever the number here, the type of structure, whether it's reinforced concrete, pre-stressed, or post-tension, familiar with the different types of concrete.
Do you want me to ask?
Yes, please.
When you putting that in, I suspect the person who is doing this may not have sufficient information to know. So is when you've got your table, which is basically driving the thing, are you going to put in things for like unknown or? Yeah. So and actually that's a very good question. And I put back here in the previous something that I probably skipped over. Preparing an RFP for structural repairs requires an engineer. If you're a licensed engineer, you may proceed. ResolveBid provides templates for this type of work. So the idea is to also instruct the user that I'm not trying, for example, to replace an engineer when an engineer is required, because sometimes they're required for specific projects. Now, in this case, because it's a structural project, the engineer would be the user, and the idea is to make the life of the engineer a little bit easier, right? This could also be used for potentially landscaping, for example. In that case, the parameters that you put in are not that difficult or complicated, and someone could just use the tool directly, right? But in this case, the type of structure that was probably where your question came. Perhaps the person doesn't have enough to be able to answer those kind of questions. The estimated amount of damage in square footage, upload engineering specifications. You can upload those documents into the tool, and then you can upload photos or any other kind of supporting documentation. There will also be, for example, screening questions. What kind of questions would you normally ask? Because typically with something like this, you would then interview the potential after you submit this, perhaps you get 4 or 5 bids. Now the tool will be able to also say, okay, you've received 3 bids, you requested 4. Do you want to, because of compliance reasons, do you want to hold off before seeing them all? You could put the email addresses of everybody, all the decision makers, all the board members, and then when the date comes,
the tool is now says, okay, now you can see it's like opening all the bids at once, right? That kind of a thing. But you'd be able to send screening questions ahead of time so that you can see, for example, how many projects of this type have you done, the name the technical associations to which your firm belongs, how many employees do you have, do you carry insurance, are you going through any litigation? These are sort of like questions that perhaps you always ask in an interview. And the idea here is also to save time and make the interview process a little more streamlined, right? So you have more information. The tool will be able to store their license information. It'll be able to store any certifications that they have. That way,
So it's all there once you open it up to.
Right. So this is actually, as far as the mock-up is concerned, that's the end of the mock-up. But once you hit review and then you see all the information and you hit submit, this would send that out to all the contractors and engineers. You could potentially put more contractors if you have a favorite one, for example. You could put that person in. But the idea is to kind of automate the process. Once the contractors receive the information, they'll be able to respond on a template. Because there's a template, all the responses would be the same, because sometimes the problem is you have different bids from different contractors. Sometimes they don't look the same and they're very difficult to compare.
Mm-hmm.
So the tool, and this comes just from the experience that I have as working with my father, he says, yes, normally there are specific templates that you can put together. There's an organization called the ICRI that I don't know if you're familiar with, that basically says, here are all the things that you would normally need to put to do a concrete repair of balconies, for example. Concrete and repair.
Civil engineers.
Yeah. So they, in other words, this is standardized for a lot of these service providers. It's just that when people are soliciting this kind of thing, they don't know that. So a lot of times a service provider or a contractor will say, yeah, here's my bid, but they didn't necessarily follow the standards. Well, this template will enforce that, right? So that all the bids that come in, you can compare them. You can say, oh, look, this person is charging me this much for the concrete, this much for the man hours, this much for, et cetera, and it's easier to compare. And then once you do that, you'd be able to call the person in for interviews. So that part of the process would not change, right? So the reason I'm going through this and interviewing people such as yourselves is to determine if really this is something that would be valuable to condo associations and property managers. So that once I start working on the tool, I'm actually building something that people would actually use.
You ready for the answers?
Yes, please.
Well, the first thing the comment was, what you've created is, the bandwidth is very narrow. Structural engineering, structural work. From my perspective, from what I've seen thus far, that's not the major issue most of the time. Projects of size have already been built. Structural engineering is usually something, not one of the most important things to be taken into consideration. Plumbing, roofing, and other projects of that size become imperative, and also it comes into play when you want to do renovation. This is not a renovation question here per se. This is structural engineering. Let's say you got a truss that's not structural style, or what have you got, a load-bearing wall that's dropping down. That's a structural issue. I think the bandwidth you've got is too narrow. You need to open it up to other occupational equivalents. Give an example. Let the cat out of the bag. I'm considering building a project of size, Loggers Run. That's not to be an option.
I'll play a deaf ear to this.
Now, if I was going to put this out to bid, I would ask, what questions would I be asking from a general contractor? So I'm looking for a general contractor. So a general contractor question would be more relevant for a homeowners association, because from the experience I had, homeowners associations do expand their clubhouses, their golf court or golf facilities and so forth. And they also add complexes to it. So general contractor is a requirement. Also, to maintain a homeowners association Condo Association. Their buildings are going to renovation a lot of time. So I'm looking at a broader bandwidth than a narrow bandwidth. So if you look at it from that perspective, the opportunity becomes much larger. It becomes more critical for a homeowners association management team as well as the board itself to have better tools at hand. This could be a better tool, but putting it into a narrow bandwidth, which your father's expertise is in, I think you're limited your opportunities down the road.
Okay.
Comment?
Well, what I was going to say was that to me, what you're describing is much more relevant to a condo.
I was just gonna
Right.
say
This
that myself.
specific example was for a
Yeah.
condo, right?
Yeah, and for a homeowners association, like Ron's saying, it's pretty limited how we could use that. But even if you were approaching it from a condo perspective, my experience of working in condo buildings, not as a property manager, just going to visit a condo building, is they have the same issues that Ron's suggesting you might want to broaden the outlook on. You know, the plumbing system, the ventilation. My son lives in a condo building down in Miami Beach. They are always having maintenance issues, and they always seem to be major. It's not just, you know, it doesn't sound like a couple of $1,000 here or there. It sounds like big investment because, you know, they're talking about the plumbing line in
Tens of thousands,
in just one section of the building, or they're talking about the irrigation system that's throughout the community, or the pool that needs maintenance. I mean, they're big items which, to some degree, this would cover. But I tend to go along with Ron that where you're going to get the benefit is more on the sort of routine maintenance, especially since most of these condo buildings have to be re-inspected maybe every 30 years. But there comes a time where, you know, they have to go out and all the major systems have to be recertified. And I would have thought if you were to look at that as a potential market, especially with the age of some of the condo buildings, you know, you've got an opportunity to develop a system that both covers buildings that are going to need certifications, which this would lend itself to, but also offer the property manager and the board a much better way of addressing just the routine maintenance, because it's on such a big, vast scale.
Right.
You've got potential to.
Now, the question I would have over something like that is, how often, when this kind of maintenance work is required, is there already maintenance contracts in place versus you're saying, no, this has to...
I'm going to, I sign checks for the association, and he does too for his association. I'm going through it almost invariably all the time, various types of contractors. Let me give you another comment. The homeowners association, condo association, whatever you want to call it, there's a annual one down in Miami, one in Fort Lauderdale, and there's one up here in Palm Beach. They have these big shows. There was something similar to what you're talking about. They signed up for, I don't know, see, it was $100, whatever it was, and you would have access to all these contractors of various types, plumbing, air conditioning, and so forth. So the model may be already there. You just need to go investigate. Let me use the word competition. Now, Angie, was it Angie's List?
Right. She
has got something similar to your concept here.
Right.
And if you have gone on board and gone online to see what she's done?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Right.
I haven't used it, but I've
Well,
seen it.
it might be worthwhile just not use it, but go on and investigate it, see what the depth is, and then you turn around and apply that for your target market. Your target market is HOA and condos association. Now, when you get that targeted, how many are the homeowners association and condo association are in the state of Florida? There's a hell of a lot of
46,000 is the number I've
Wow.
heard.
several thousands. Yeah. So the target market opportunity is there. Now, how much is it worth to them to have a tool that they can go online for, I don't know, $100 a month or whatever it may be, to have access to this large database to find vendors that have gotten recommendations from other associations that have been successful with them. That's important because right now when we're dealing with electrical contractors, for example, some of them are really good and some of them are really not that good. Plumbers, same thing. Sprinkler people, it's hard to find the right people.
Irrigation, yeah.
Irrigation is a big issue here. So irrigation, plumbing, also security systems. You know, security comes in different flavors, whether it's the type that's inside the building or somebody that you hire to run around their truck. So you've got to open your bandwidth to thinking, in my mind.
Right.
I think you're too narrowly defined.
Yeah.
Sounds
And
like Shark Tank.
It's giving you a command to.
oh yeah.
Ron makes a good point that certainly the stage you're at, there are these shows that you may be familiar with that are really county oriented. So there's one down for Miami-Dade, there's one for Broward, there's one for Palm Beach. They have generally they have 2 shows a year. So the fall shows will be coming up probably in the next October time, I'm going to say, because I'm starting to get mailings for them. And you would, the Palm Beach, generally they're out at the fairgrounds, the Broward Convention Centre, or the Miami Beach Convention Centre, although not quite sure what's going on.
I would definitely make the effort to go for sure.
Yeah, if you, I think all of us get notices. There's one in December, and I usually go to that one in December, which is one's coming up.
Well, if it's, for example, the example that you mentioned, right? Like I've actually had difficulty finding, other than people like Angie's List, finding competitors that are targeting
There's
the
another
HOA.
one down here in South Florida. I had a write-up on. In fact, we used it there for a while. I don't know why we dropped off, but that a different management team was in at the time.
The thick problem that I find with, I don't use Angie's List because I think there's a credibility issue there. I think if you're going to get into that kind of market, if you can build in a way of monitoring the performance of the people who respond to the bids,
Right.
so your database becomes more of a sort of management aid, because so the property managers or the engineers, whoever they may be using the system, actually recognize that you're collating all this information in the database to put up the people who in the past experience have done a good job. Now, whether that's actually part of what you do in your first phase.
Well, you have a good point. You got to have a way of feeding the database.
Right.
And you got to have a way of purifying the database. You know, a shyster can come in and say, "Let me tell you how great I am." Well, you got to have a way of validating that information, because you can't load it with crap. Otherwise, your database would be worthless no time at all. So this is another concern. This is one of the things I've got concerned about. The database that they had proposed was that the vendors themselves paid to be on that database. Which kind of put it in a question mark. If I'm paying to be on the database so I could get bids, so it was a way to get, that's how they wanted to get on the bid cycle. Made me wonder who's validating their credibility in the background.
Right.
You understand what
Yeah, I understand what you mean.
See where I'm coming from?
Yeah, and actually, I've thought about that to some extent. My idea has been that this is something that I wouldn't charge the homeowners association for, and that I would charge either a monthly fee somewhere in the neighborhood between $20 and $50 to the contractors, or a per bid fee.
On a per bid basis.
Yeah, on a
Well,
per. Yeah.
My point is, do your research, find out how they are doing it.
Right.
I would suggest going to the one in December. I think that was down in the Fort Lauderdale Memorial Coliseum, what do they call it? And that's a big show. And there's one down in Miami also. You had to look up those. You're trying to boil the ocean. You got to remember, you can't boil the ocean. You got to boil it down to the target. So
I love his analogies. I love his analogies. I really do.
You can't boil the ocean.
Can't boil the ocean. That's a good one.
But that's a common one, right?
Get down to what is your target market. Don't make it so narrow that you can't make money. The opportunity. You're in this business for what purpose?
It's a business.
Making money,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, it's a business.
Eventually.
That's the idea. At some
You're
point.
just like the prostitute. You work for money, right? Excuse me. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I know you by now, Ron. Don't worry about it.
So, the bigger you can make the target market, the better opportunity you're going to have. But if you narrow your market, you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Right.
So it comes down to the design of the software. So you need an architect to help you design this. Once you figure out you've got to come up with a set of requirements. Have you sat down and define what the requirements are?
For the software itself?
for the software itself as well as for the market.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's still kind of a work in progress. Now, what I showed you was
You got a beginning.
Yeah.
When I was in managed software, the first thing we did, I had an architect. I said, here's the problem. Well, the problem is what I'm talking about, the definition. This is the problem to solve. I need an architect to sit down and design a system. It's a global thing. He didn't design the software coding it. Then he broke the code down. He said, okay, here's the pieces. You get the general idea.
yeah.
Then you sit down and write the requirements. Once you start with the basics, then you have a chance to come down to the finish line and sell you got something you can sell to your investors.
Right.
Because if they can see it has value at the finish line, I will shell a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting thing is a lot of people in the program, like myself, that have a technical background, will go for that. That's totally like but they try to encourage you. You have to, before you start developing or coding or spending, you got to make sure. Yeah, you got to have a concept
I leap beyond concept.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the finish line. Where is the finish line?
Yeah.
Where is it? The bar is way out here.
No, and I think your comments are extremely important because I need to have that vision already, like where it's going to be, because
You're going to have a target.
Yeah, the whole idea of not just limiting it to structural repairs and including plumbing and
That's just a
landscaping.
concept
That's just.
Right.
But you're right that it's very, very important because if it's too limited, then how often does someone need structural repair? Once every 5 or 10 years, right?
Exactly.
As far as condo associations or homeowners
Whatever.
associations.
Like you said, a broader band than that. You can't be
Don't
as
forget
narrow.
storm damage. You know, we kind of on borrowed time as far as hurricanes and storms and what have you. And obviously, if a storm rolls through and it's a big storm, that's going to
Turn your volume up a little bit, Richard.
Yeah. He talks very softly. I know I have.
Right.
That's going to precipitate a lot more effort on the part of the associations. What I think, to me, what I look at more is, well, who's going to pay for this and what's the perceived value?
Right. Right.
Good point.
Yeah.
Because I can see, from the condo association's point of view, let's say, or the property manager, if you appeal to them, there may be a sale potentially there, but I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the condo costs to know and the difficulty of finding vendors. But like Ron says, the difficulty you have of finding good vendors, I suspect, is the same in a condo. And so the opportunity to be able to tap into a system where you've got a reasonably good chance, based on experience, that these guys know what they're doing, especially if it's going to be expensive.
David, you should be taking notes.
It's being recorded.
It's being recorded. Remember, he's got it recorded better than even taking notes.
Well, let me give you a perspective on what follow up on his comment. Who actually makes the decision at a homeowners association?
It varies depending on but it's usually the board, right? The board.
No. It starts with where? Where does it start?
The homeowners?
No. It starts with the management company.
Really?
Let's start with the beginning. You need to come to a board meeting. You need to start going to the management, sit down with management. We hired a company, and this is very typical. We hired a company to manage our business. I got almost a $2 million budget, okay? I look at it this way, they've heard this speech before. I look at the guy managing our business as the CEO of our company called Loggers Run. We hired him with stockholders.
Mm-hmm.
That guy, I've dedicated to him to manage our business. Therefore, he's got 2 responsibilities. One is to answer to us and the answer to his management company. So he's got one, manage the staff he's got, and he's also got to answer to us. So that's the way that relationship works.
Yeah.
Second point to that is, if he's dealing with the outside world, he's the first eyes on the street, so to speak, as to what the issues are.
Right.
So if he sees a problem, he says, I got let's say, electrical problem or engineering problem or whatever it happens to be. His job is to define the problem, find the resources for that problem to be solved, and present it to the board. I didn't do it, she didn't do it. We have to give the okay on the decision. He brings forth a recommendation. That's the general process. The process says, in so many words, I have to validate my CEO's decision. Follow me so far? So he's picked a vendor or several vendors for us to choose from. So if he's got access to a database to start with, it minimizes his efforts and reduces his time chasing a rabbit, so to speak.
Right.
You like that?
I like that.
All right. But once he reduces that, he's got his time. Time is valuable because he's got so many hours in a day. He can't spend all of his time looking up, trying to find a vendor to do this or that. If he's got a resource that he can tap into and says, I need a da-da-da-da-da, give me 3 quotes. And here's my requirements. He's reduced his time. He's got about something has been validated as qualified vendors. They can respond to him based upon his requirements. Now, this has got to set up a way of getting a set of requirements. What are the requirements? In other words, what's the problem?
Right.
Once he got the problem defined for them, then they can bid on it. Then he can validate their bids once it comes in. He then makes a decision to present A, B, and C, or just A, to the board. That's how the process basically works.
Mhm.
Is that right, Richard?
Yeah. The important thing is what this system potentially does is collate the information so that you can compare apples with apples, is what you're saying.
Right.
So, because what we, if you look at the estimates we get, you kind of have to pick through it to figure out.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's frustrating for me, and it's for
Yeah.
all three,
For
all of us really.
All of us, yep.
Our board is 15 people roughly on the board, and I manage differently. I manage it down to an executive committee. What I do is flush out all the issues before it takes it to the master board. It makes it a hell of a lot easier to manage the bigger problem.
That's right.
And you've seen how much better it's been run.
Oh, yeah.
When we can sit and argue over something in the lower board, in the executive committee, and present it to them. So when it's presented to the master board, this is a recommendation. It means it's been through at least two validations.
Processes already, right.
The management office has validated. Then the master executive committee has gone through it and validated and said, yes, we can present it to the master board for their assessment and their vote. So that makes sense.
Mhm.
Before it was chaos.
Yeah, total
But
chaos.
when you say the master board, you're talking about Loggers Run, the
I'm
parent homeowners.
Let me try it again. There's 2 pieces to what I'm saying. First is the executive committee, which are the officers
That's
of
the
Loggers
officers.
Run.
Yeah.
So I have the executive
But we have
board.
5.
It's just the ones that we elected, president, vice president, so forth.
Sergeant of Arms.
Yeah,
And
that's
when we get through flushing it out at that level, the senior people, if you will, then we present it to the master board and to the homeowners. The homeowners, if they want to show up and listen to all this, that's fine. We love it.
Mhm.
I wish they'd show up more, but
Out of 1,840 families, we get an average of maybe 12
Sorry?
people.
not even
15
average.
people. 12, 15.
I don't know if this is helping you or not.
Yes,
You need to go to a board meeting. You need to go to the office and sit down and interview some management officers,
Yeah.
not just on the.
You said you've done other board of government, excuse
Yeah,
me, but,
yeah.
but have you actually done management?
Well,
Like,
I
companies
have,
or-
yeah. Only a couple. Usually, it's been mostly board members. I find that there's a lot of differences, right? Like for example, the building that I just came from in Hallandale, they say there's basically self-managed. They hire a manager, an LCAM, but there's not actually a management company.
Management company.
Yeah,
Mm.
so they would tend to be more of like we make the call, right, and then we tell obviously the day-to-day
That
stuff
was
is done by.
proposed for us too, but we chose to go the other way
Right.
with
But
management companies.
don't lose the fundamental principle in the Homeowners Association is that the board is the responsible for the community. So the property, like Ron's saying, the property manager, anybody else can go look at anything you like, but fundamentally, if
The
you're
decision.
doing it right, that's got to come
Back to
back to the board as a
Bottom line.
recommendation, and the board says either yay or nay.
Right.
What the problem I think in selling it to board members is we're all volunteers. So the advantage to us in what you're proposing is in terms of the benefit that's associated with streamlining the process, putting the information consistent format so we can look at it and figure it out. which was what Ron's alluding to, is if you take Loggers Run, and I wouldn't worry too much about the fact you've got a master and a sub-association kind of it's the same principle, whether it's the sub or the master. But what's important is, I think, to get a better understanding of what the property managers do, because what the property manager is going to be the one you can sell it to, if you like, in terms of a tangible benefit, because
Right.
he is going to be busy, especially if he's got, homeowners forever banging on about whatever the issues are. If he's got some major project to deal with, and he's got a source that he can trust to give him reliable information and save him time, that's where I think you're going to find there's a benefit. And then, in our case, as a case in point, we have a company who represents the property management company. So if you can appeal to one property management company, you appeal to many property managers. So in many ways, you get a better bang for your buck, if you like,
Right.
by doing the research on the property management companies, finding the big ones like we use Campbell down in Deerfield. Before that, we used Castle, which is another big company.
That's the one Book Falls uses.
Yeah.
So David, what's your next step?
Well, actually, there is this is wrapping up the sort of, at least this week, the validation of the tool. There is a step having to do with incorporation that happens within the next 3 weeks as part of our program, right? Then I have to actually build the tool itself. That's, and I start that probably. I've already kind of started that, but then I halted it to go through all the business validation and everything, which is what the program emphasizes. Once I have the tool built out, which I estimate will probably be like, I don't know, January or February timeframe, then I would basically put it out and validate it more directly, the end-to-end model, right?
Don't forget to do your requirements.
Yeah, of course. No, and I need to obviously broaden it. It's interesting, like the database is already kind of started. It's already got, for example, there's 170,000 contractors already in the database, but that's because I just took the ones from the state of Florida.
Well, once you build it beyond this, it becomes enormous in size, because you got plumbers, roofers, and so forth, painters,
All
whatever.
the other vendors, yeah.
Once you load all of those in there, then how are you going to validate who is quality versus the bad guys?
So initially,
That's a good question.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so initially there will be, like, for example, the database is existing today is cross-referenced with the BBB, so you already know, for
It
example,
is,
that
okay.
helps to whittle it down a tiny bit, right?
Very little.
Yeah.
But you can get on that list pretty easy, I think, can't you?
The BBB.
Well, but there's also the rating. Yeah, there's some people that have some horrible ratings that are registered in the
True,
BBB.
true. Which
Yeah.
is important. You want to see that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, baby.
and I believe that by and I don't want to report his personal call. Maybe right now I